In a small, dusty town where nothing exciting ever really happened, lived a young man named Raj. He had a dream that was too big for the little room he rented in his grandmother's house. Raj loved music more than anything else in the world. While his friends were out playing cricket or watching movies, Raj was usually hunched over his second-hand keyboard, trying to make the sounds in his head come alive through the speakers. He wrote beautiful, slow songs that made people think, but there was one big problem. Raj was incredibly shy. The moment he had to stand in front of a crowd, his hands would shake, his throat would go dry, and his mind would go blank. He wanted to perform. He wanted to share his songs with the world, but he was terrified. He knew that if he went up on stage and just played his serious music, people would judge him. They might laugh, or worse, they might just ignore him completely. In the music world, it is very hard for new artists to get noticed unless they are already famous. Raj felt stuck. He had all this talent trapped inside him, but no way to let it out without feeling like his heart was going to explode from nervousness. One evening, while he was eating dinner and watching a comedy show on TV, an idea popped into his head. He watched how the audience laughed at the silly characters. They didn't judge the actors because they knew it was all a joke. They were relaxed. Raj thought, what if I could do that? What if I make them think it's a joke, so they don't judge me? Then I can play my real music. It was a crazy plan, but the more he thought about it, the more it made sense to him. If he went on stage as a serious musician named Raj, people would be critical. They would look for mistakes. But if he went on stage as a crazy, funny character, they would lower their guard. They wouldn't expect good music. They would expect to laugh. Raj decided to create a fake person. He called this character the Velvet Cabbage. It was a ridiculous name, and that was exactly the point. He spent the next 2 weeks getting his costume ready. He didn't want to look cool. He wanted to look absurd. He went to a local thrift store and dug through bins of old clothes until he found a bright purple suit that was 3 sizes too big. The shoulders were huge, and the arms were so long he had to roll them up just to see his hands. Then he found a wig. It wasn't just any wig. It was a bright green curly wig that looked like a messy mop on top of his head. To finish the look, he bought a pair of giant, silly sunglasses that covered half his face. When Raj looked in the mirror, he didn't see himself anymore. He saw the Velvet Cabbage. He looked like a clown. When he put the costume on, he felt a strange change happen inside him. As Raj, he was scared and worried about what people thought. But as the Velvet Cabbage, he felt powerful. He felt like he could do anything because it didn't matter. If he messed up, everyone would just think it was part of the funny act. The big opportunity came when the town announced its annual talent night. It was the busiest night of the year at the local community hall. Everyone went to it, families, teenagers, old people, and even the local mayor. Raj signed up, but he didn't sign his real name. He wrote the Velvet Cabbage experimental comedy music on the application form. The organizers looked at the name and scratched their heads, but they put him on the list anyway. They thought it would be a funny break between the dance recitals and the singers. As the day of the show got closer, Raj started to feel a mix of excitement and dread. He practiced his songs over and over again. He chose the pieces he had written that were the most emotional and beautiful. These were songs that came from deep in his heart, songs about missing someone and hoping for a better future. He knew these were good songs, but he was still planning to trick the audience into hearing them. He told his friends he was doing a skit and warned them not to take it seriously. It's just going to be really bad and funny, he lied to them. He wanted to make sure that even his friends were in on the joke. That way, if the music turned out to be good, it would be a surprise for them too. Raj was building a safety net around himself. By telling everyone it was going to be a joke, he was protecting himself from the pain of failure. If they hated it, he could just say, "See? I told you it was a joke." On the night of the performance, the community hall was packed. The air smelled like popcorn and old floor wax. People were chatting loudly, waiting for the show to start. Backstage, Raj sat in a corner, his heart beating so hard he could feel it in his ears. He looked at the purple suit hanging on the rack and took a deep breath. This was it. This was his chance to finally be heard, even if he had to hide behind a mask of glitter and green hair to do it. He put on the wig, adjusted the giant sunglasses, and walked toward the curtain, ready to play the greatest trick of his life. The lights inside the community hall were bright, almost too bright, as Raj walked onto the wooden stage. He was no longer Raj in that moment. He was completely hidden inside the character of the Velvet Cabbage. The audience looked up from their drinks and snacks, and the moment they saw him, a loud wave of laughter rippled through the room. He looked exactly as ridiculous as he had planned. The purple suit was baggy in all the wrong places. The green curly wig bounced with every step he took, and those giant black sunglasses hid his eyes completely. People pointed, whispered to their neighbors, and nudged each other. They thought they were in for a few minutes of silly entertainment. A quick laugh before the next singer came on, Raj walked over to the old keyboard that had been set up in the center of the stage. It was a dusty instrument, probably borrowed from the church down the road. He sat down on the stool, and his feet barely touched the floor because he was slouching to look smaller. The crowd was still giggling. A few people in the front row, maybe a bit drunk or just feeling bold, started to shout things. "Hey, Cabbage Man, play us a lullaby." One guy yelled. Another one whistled loudly and shouted, "Let's hear some noise." Raj didn't react. He just adjusted the microphone, his large hands making the stand wobble. For a second, Raj froze. His heart was hammering against his ribs, so hard he thought it might break through the costume. He had rehearsed this 100 times in his room, but being here, surrounded by hundreds of staring eyes, was completely different. The doubt started to creep in. What if they didn't get it? What if they just hated it? What if they threw tomatoes? He felt a drop of sweat run down his forehead, hidden safely under the itchy green wig. He remembered his plan, treat it like a joke. If he acted like he didn't care, they wouldn't care either. But his hands were shaking as he placed them over the keys. He decided to start with a bang. He pushed a button on the keyboard that added a silly, thumping drum beat in the background. Thump, thump, clap, thump, thump, clap. It was a cheesy rhythm that people use in aerobics classes. The crowd laughed even louder. They thought this was the punchline already. Then Raj hit the first chord. It was loud and messy. He smashed his hands down on the keys, making a dissonant, clashing noise. "Yeah," someone screamed from the back. "That's what I'm talking about." They were eating it up? They thought this was the bad music act they had been promised. Raj kept playing the messy noise for about 30 seconds. He swayed his head back and forth dramatically, acting like he was a rock star. The more exaggerated his movements, the more the audience laughed. They were under the spell of the joke. They were relaxed. They weren't analyzing the music. They were just enjoying the spectacle. But as Raj looked out at the sea of laughing faces, he felt a sudden pang of sadness. These were his songs. This was his heart. He didn't want to be a clown anymore. He realized that hiding behind the joke was actually painful. He wanted them to hear the music, not just see the suit. Taking a deep breath, he decided it was time to make the switch, even if it was risky. He stopped the chaotic drum beat with his foot. The sudden silence caught the audience off guard. The laughter died down a little as people waited to see what the funny green man would do next. Raj's hands hovered over the keys. He wasn't going to smash them this time. He closed his eyes behind the dark glasses, took a moment to find his courage, and pressed down gently. The sound that came out was not noise. It was a clear, high-pitched melody, pure like a bell. It was the intro to the first song he had ever written, a piece that usually made people cry. For a few seconds, the crowd was confused. They waited for the beat to drop or for him to start making silly noises again. But Raj didn't. He let the melody hang in the air. Then he brought his left hand in and added a deep, rolling bass line. The combination was beautiful. It was complex and emotional. Nothing like the chaotic noise from moments before. A hush began to fall over the room, but it wasn't immediate. It started at the front. A few people stopped talking. They turned their chairs slightly toward the stage. The smirk on their faces faded, replaced by a look of confusion. They were trying to figure out if this was still part of the act. Was he playing badly on purpose now because it was too serious? Or was he actually good? Then the heckling started again, but this time it was different. "Hey, get back to the funny stuff," a voice shouted from the darkness. Someone else booed loudly. They felt cheated. They wanted a clown, not a musician. Raj heard the booing, and it stung. His fingers almost slipped off the keys. He felt like running away. The plan was failing. The joke wasn't protecting him. It was trapping him. He was stuck between being a funny character nobody respected and a musician nobody wanted to hear, but Raj was already on the stage. He couldn't leave. He thought about his grandmother, who used to tell him that true art speaks for itself. He realized that if he stopped now, he would go back to just being the quiet boy who was afraid of everything. He decided to ignore the booing. He decided to play harder, louder, and with more soul than he ever had in his life. He moved into the chorus of the song. The melody built up, rising higher and higher. The sound filled the dusty hall. It was a sound that demanded respect. It was rich and full of feeling. As the music swelled, something incredible started to happen. The people who were booing realized they couldn't be heard over the beautiful sound coming from the keyboard. The sheer volume and quality of Raj's playing began to overpower the noise of the crowd. The music was so strong that it forced them to listen. Raj was pouring everything he had into the performance. Every rejection he had ever felt, every time he had been ignored, every lonely night in his room, it was all flowing out through his fingertips. The joke performance was becoming real. The funny suit didn't matter anymore. The green wig didn't matter. All that mattered was the sound. And slowly, one by one, the audience began to turn their full attention to the stage. They weren't laughing anymore. They were watching. They were listening. The transformation had begun. The music was growing louder, filling every corner of the big hall. Raj's fingers were moving across the keys so fast that they looked like a blur. He wasn't reading any music. He was playing from memory, but more than that, he was playing from his heart. The sound wasn't just noise anymore. It was like a story was being told without any words. The deep notes made the wooden floor hum, and the high notes floated up to the ceiling like birds. At the back of the room, a group of teenagers who had been talking loudly and checking their phones suddenly stopped. One of them, a boy wearing a hoodie, looked up from his screen with a confused look on his face. He tapped his friend on the shoulder and pointed to the stage. The friend looked up, expecting to see something funny, but instead, he saw this strange man in a ridiculous purple suit playing music that actually sounded really good. The boy put his phone in his pocket. He didn't mean to, but he just couldn't look away. The music had hooked him. In the middle of the hall, a mother was trying to quiet down her restless little girl. The little girl had been squirming in her seat and complaining that she wanted to go home. But when the melody changed, becoming softer and more gentle, the girl stopped moving. She stared at the stage with wide eyes. It was as if the music was a magical spell that calmed her down. The mother looked at her daughter, surprised, and then looked at the stage. She saw Raj swaying slightly with the music, his head bowed low. She realized that the man playing the keyboard wasn't pretending. He was feeling something deep, and he was sharing it with them, the hecklers in the front. The ones who had been shouting for jokes were now the quietest ones in the room. The man who had yelled for the funny stuff earlier slowly sat back down in his folding chair. He crossed his arms, a stubborn look on his face, but he didn't shout again. He watched Raj's hands. He saw that Raj wasn't just hitting random keys. He was playing complicated patterns, moving his hands up and down the keyboard with a skill that you don't see every day. The man realized he had been wrong. He thought this was going to be a waste of time, but he was actually listening to a talented musician. The atmosphere in the hall was changing completely. Just a few minutes ago, the air had been full of laughter and talking. Now it felt heavy and serious. It was the kind of silence that you feel not just here. People were leaning forward in their seats. Some people rested their chins on their hands, captivated by the sound. The joke had completely disappeared. Nobody was looking at the big green wig or the silly suit anymore. They were looking at the artist. Raj still had his eyes closed tight. He was too scared to open them. He was afraid that if he looked out, he would see people laughing or leaving and he would lose his nerve. So he kept his eyes shut and just let the music take him away. He played a section of the song that was very fast and exciting. It sounded like rain falling on a tin roof, fast and rhythmic. The sound bounced off the walls. He could feel the energy of the room shifting. It wasn't hostile anymore. It was appreciative. He could feel that they were with him now. They weren't fighting him. They were listening. There was a moment right in the middle of the song where Raj hit a wrong note. His finger slipped. Clunk. It was a dull sound that didn't fit with the pretty melody. Raj flinched inside. He thought, that's it. They're going to laugh now. They know I'm a fake. He waited for the laughter to start. He waited for someone to shout, "Get off the stage!" But the laughter never came. The audience just let that mistake pass. They understood that it was live music. They were so wrapped up in the emotion of the piece that one little mistake didn't matter. In fact, it made it seem more real. It proved that there was a real human being sitting there, trying his best. This silence and focus were new to Raj. He had played for his mirror. And he had played for his dog, but he had never played for a room full of people who were actually hearing him. It gave him a rush of energy. He felt electricity running through his arms. He decided to take a risk. He stopped playing the written melody and started to improvise, to make up new music right there on the spot. He played a series of notes that were sad and lonely, then answered them with notes that were hopeful and bright. It was like he was having a conversation with the keyboard. The lights overhead were warm, and Raj could feel sweat trickling down his back inside the oversized suit. But he didn't care about being uncomfortable. He felt powerful. For years he had been the quiet one, the one who blended into the background. But right now, in this weird costume, he was the most important person in the room. He realized something incredible in that moment. The costume wasn't hiding him anymore. The costume had actually allowed him to come out. The joke had acted like a shield, and now that the shield had worked, he could drop his guard and be his true self. The song was moving toward its highest point. The notes were getting higher and faster. The sound was swelling like a wave in the ocean. Raj lifted his head slightly, though he still didn't open his eyes. He looked like a conductor leading an invisible orchestra. The audience was holding their breath. They knew something big was coming. They weren't thinking about their groceries or their jobs anymore. They weren't thinking about how funny the man in the green wig looked. They were just feeling the music. It was a shared experience. 300 strangers, all connected by the sound coming from one man's hands. The realization hit the crowd all at once, or maybe it hit them slowly, one by one. They had been fooled, but not in the way they expected. They thought they were being tricked into watching a bad show, but instead, they had been tricked into witnessing something beautiful. The irony of it made the experience even more special. This wasn't a clown playing music. This was a master pretending to be a clown, and in doing so, he had made them listen without prejudice. The barriers were down. The judgment was gone. There was only the music, pure and honest, filling the room. The song was reaching its final moments. Raj's fingers moved to the highest keys on the keyboard, playing a melody that was so sweet and piercing it felt like it was touching the soul of everyone in the room. He played the last few notes slowly, letting each one ring out clearly before fading away. Then his hands hovered over the keys and he lifted them up into the air. The music stopped. For a few seconds there was complete and total silence. It was the kind of silence that is heavy and thick. You could hear the air conditioner humming in the background and the sound of a car driving by outside, but inside the hall, nobody made a sound. Raj sat frozen on the stool. His chest was heaving up and down as he tried to catch his breath. He was terrified. The silence felt like a weight pressing down on him. In his mind, he was sure they hated it. He thought they were just gathering their breath to boo him off the stage. He kept his eyes squeezed shut, waiting for the shouting to start. He wished the floor would just open up and swallow him whole. Then, a single pair of hands started clapping. It was an older man sitting near the front. He clapped slowly, with a deep, heavy rhythm. Asterisk clap, clap. Clap. Asterisk. Then the mother of the little girl joined in. Then the teenagers in the back. Suddenly, like a dam breaking, the noise exploded. It wasn't just polite clapping. It was a roar. The whole room erupted in cheers and applause. People stood up from their chairs. They were whistling and stomping their feet. The noise was so loud it vibrated in Raj's chest. Raj slowly opened his eyes, blinking behind the dark giant sunglasses. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. 300 people were on their feet. They weren't laughing at him. They were cheering for him. Their faces weren't full of mockery. They were smiling, some were even wiping tears from their eyes. The man who had yelled at him earlier was now clapping the loudest, a look of total shock on his face. A wave of relief washed over Raj, so strong it almost made him fall off the bench. He did it, it actually worked. The joke had become something real. The trick had succeeded, but not in the way he planned. He tricked them into listening, and once they listened, they loved it. He felt a lump form in his throat, a feeling of pure emotion that he hadn't felt in years. All the lonely nights, all the doubts, they all seemed to melt away in the heat of the crowd's applause. He stood up slowly. His legs felt shaky, like a newborn deer trying to walk for the first time. He adjusted his purple suit, which was now soaked with sweat under the hot stage lights. He gave a clumsy little bow. He didn't know how to bow like a fancy concert pianist, so he just nodded his head awkwardly. The crowd loved it even more. They screamed, "Encore, encore." They wanted him to play another song. Raj looked at the keyboard and looked at the audience. He knew he couldn't play another song. He didn't have any other material prepared that was good enough, and he didn't want to push his luck. He had given them everything he had. He waved his hand, a shy gesture of thanks, and turned to walk off the stage. As he walked, the applause followed him, getting louder as he reached the side curtains. Backstage, he collapsed onto a wooden crate. He pulled off the giant sunglasses and wiped the sweat from his eyes. His hands were trembling uncontrollably now that it was over. He took deep, gasping breaths, trying to calm his racing heart. A stagehand, a young guy holding a microphone cable, walked by and stopped. He looked at Raj, really looked at him, and said, "Man, I have no idea what that was, but that was incredible. You can really play." Raj just nodded, unable to speak. He felt like he was floating. The adrenaline was pumping through his veins, making him feel dizzy and light at the same time. He listened to the noise from the stage as the next act was being introduced. The crowd was still buzzing. They were talking about the Velvet Cabbage. He heard snippets of conversations as people walked past the curtain. "Did you hear that song?" One person whispered. "I thought it was going to be a joke, but I actually cried," said another. Raj sat in the shadows, holding his green wig in his hands. He looked at the ridiculous piece of hair and smiled. For the first time in his life, he felt proud of himself. He didn't run away. He didn't hide. He stood up there, dressed like a fool, and he showed the world his heart. And the world had accepted it. He realized that fear had been his only enemy. The music was always good enough. He was always talented enough. The only thing stopping him was the voice in his head that said, "They will laugh." Well, they did laugh at first, but then they listened. And that was the lesson. Sometimes you have to trick people into giving you a chance. You have to lower their expectations so that you can surprise them with the truth. After a few minutes, the owner of the hall, a stout man with a gray mustache, came backstage. He found Raj sitting on the crate. The owner didn't look angry or annoyed. He looked impressed. "Hey, Cabbage," he said with a grin. "That was quite a show. The crowd loved it. You wouldn't be interested in coming back next month, would you? People are already asking about you." Raj looked up, stunned. "You want me back? Even with the suit?" The owner laughed. "Especially with the suit. It's the act, kid. It's brilliant. You bring them in with the comedy, and you blow them away with the music. It's a winner." Raj stood up and shook the man's hand. "Yes," Raj said, his voice finally steady. "I would love to come back." Walking out of the back door of the hall into the cool night air, Raj felt different. The town was quiet, the streetlights were flickering, and the crickets were chirping. But to Raj, the world looked brighter. He wasn't just a shy guy with a keyboard anymore. He was the Velvet Cabbage. He was a performer. He had a voice, and he had found a way to make it heard. He got on his bicycle, wearing his normal clothes now, with the purple suit folded in his backpack. He pedaled home, humming the melody of his song, feeling lighter than air. The joke was over, but his life as an artist had just begun. After that incredible night, Raj's life changed in ways he never expected. He didn't become a famous superstar overnight, and he didn't move to a big city right away. Instead, his transformation happened slowly, right there in his small town. The very next day, people began to recognize him. He went to the local market to buy vegetables for his grandmother, and the shopkeeper, who usually ignored him, looked at him with wide eyes. "Hey, you're the cabbage guy," the shopkeeper shouted with a big smile. "My daughter couldn't stop talking about your show. She said you were like a wizard on that keyboard." Raj just smiled shyly and paid for his tomatoes, but inside he felt 10 feet tall. It was the first time he felt respected in his own neighborhood. However, with this new attention came a big decision that Raj had to make. The offer from the hall owner to play again was real, and other small venues started calling him too. But they all wanted the same thing. They didn't want Raj, the serious musician. They wanted the Velvet Cabbage, the crazy guy in the purple suit. This put Raj in a difficult spot. Part of him wanted to burn the wig and the suit. He wanted to prove that he was a serious artist who could wear a tuxedo and play beautiful music on a grand stage. He worried that if he kept wearing the costume, people would never take him seriously. They would always think he was just a clown, but another part of him remembered the fear he used to feel. He remembered how paralyzed he was before he created the character. The costume was like a suit of armor. It protected him from his own nerves. As long as he was the Velvet Cabbage, he felt safe. He realized that the character wasn't a cage. It was a bridge. It was a way for him to connect with people who might not usually listen to his kind of music. Raj decided to compromise. He accepted the bookings, but he made a deal with himself. He would use the character to get him in the door, but he would never joke about the music again. The act would no longer be that the music was bad. The act would simply be that a strange-looking man played beautiful music. The next month, Raj played at the town hall again. This time, the crowd was even bigger. Word had spread. People brought their friends just to see if the rumors were true. When Raj walked out on stage, the cheers were instant. He did his silly wave, he adjusted his giant sunglasses, and the audience laughed. But the moment his hands touched the keys, the laughter stopped. They knew the secret now. They knew that behind the joke was real talent. Raj played a new song he had written. It was a song about hope and growing up. As he played, he looked out at the crowd. He saw young people recording him on their phones. He saw old couples holding hands. He saw the little girl from the last show dancing near the front. It was a diverse group of people, all brought together by this strange mix of comedy and art. Raj realized that by dropping his ego and putting on the wig, he had managed to break down the walls between different kinds of people. The music was the universal language, but the costume was the invitation. As the months went by, Raj began to change as a person too. The confidence he found on stage started to spill over into his daily life. He stopped walking with his head down. He started speaking up in conversations. He even helped his grandmother organize the community choir. He realized that the fear he had was all in his head. He had spent years worrying about what people thought of him, but once he faced that fear and survived, he felt invincible. One afternoon, a talent scout from a nearby city visited the town. He had heard a recording of the Velvet Cabbage that someone had posted online. He met Raj after a show, expecting to meet a comedian. Instead, he found a quiet, polite young man drinking water. The scout was confused. "You play incredibly," the scout said. "Why the mask? Why the suit? With your skills, you could be a classical pianist." Raj thought about this for a moment. He looked at his purple suit hanging on the rack and then back at the scout. Because, Raj said softly, the suit helps me be brave. And it helps people listen without judging. If I just walked out there as myself, I would be too scared to play a single note. The suit lets me be free. The scout nodded slowly. He understood. In the world of entertainment, connecting with people is the hardest thing to do. If a green wig and a baggy suit were the keys to unlocking that connection, then who was he to say it was wrong? The scout didn't offer him a classical contract, but he did offer to help him make a professional album. He suggested they call it The Velvet Cabbage Plays for Real. Raj loved the idea. Years later, Raj became a local legend. He never became a worldwide pop star, and he didn't win any fancy trophies on TV, but he did something that many artists only dream of. He brought joy to his community. Every Friday night, people would pack the local hall to see the strange man in the purple suit. They came for the fun of it, but they left feeling moved. Raj taught everyone in the town a valuable lesson. Sometimes you have to be a little bit silly to find your true self. He showed that it doesn't matter what you look like on the outside. What matters is the heart you put into your work. The joke that started as a way to hide had turned into something incredible, a life of purpose, music, and happiness. And to think it all happened because a shy boy decided to put on a wig and play his heart out.